Welcome aboard.
Please welcome to the stage Axios crypto reporter Brady Dale.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this very early, at least for me, morning in Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brady Dale. I write the Axios crypto newsletter. Comes out every Tuesday and Thursday. You should all definitely subscribe. And if you're following along on social media, please use the hashtag Axios Events, all one word. And this morning, we'll be discussing what's at stake for cryptocurrency, the digital asset industry, as Washington likes to call it, in this election and also in regulation and legislation for this year and next year. So please welcome our first guest for this morning, Minnesota Congressman, Majority Whip, and champion of cryptocurrency, Representative Tom Emmer. All right, great to see you, Representative Emmer.
Good to see you on a beautiful fall day in
Thank
Washington,
you.
D.C.
Okay, first question, a real quick one. Prediction markets are a hot topic right now. Let's imagine you were forced to put down $1,000 right now in a poly market or pick your prediction market of choice on who, I know what you want, but who would actually win House, Senate, and White House? Which party is going to get those? Put all three together. How would you put down your $1,000 right now?
I think Republicans are going to win all three.
Oh, you think really? You really think all sweet?
Yeah, and the problem we have in this town and across the country is the media doesn't give you the whole thing. I mean, if you look at this, Donald Trump, if you look at all of the polling, and I'm not a big fan of polls because they're just snapshots, right? You got to look at the trends. He's leading in 5 of the 7 battleground states. You might have seen somebody started writing this morning that Kamala's got, it's an impossible journey for her to win if Trump's winning Pennsylvania, Georgia, and I forget the other one. But there's 3 states that if he wins, it's over. I think Trump is in a place where people understand. I love that debate last week. If you were voting for her, you're still voting for her. If you're voting for Trump, you're still voting for Trump. And then they say there's this big group of people in here that are undecided. Really? I don't think there are any people that are undecided when it comes to the personalities involved. I think they're going to make their decisions like Americans usually do on their pocketbook and on how they feel compared to how they felt before the pandemic.
So, okay, so if that's the scenario, if it's a sweep of all three, what does that mean for cryptocurrency legislation in the next session? And what legislator do you think will be the first to move something through Congress if that is to happen?
Well, let's back up. Let's not rush to the 119th because if I'm correct, it might mean a very productive lame duck.
Okay.
Which, by the way,
you're jumping ahead here for me, but that's fine. Do your thing.
Well, I'm sorry.
It's all good.
I'm almost chronological. It's like I don't.
Yeah.
But the lame duck, if we're in control, Trump has already said he will be the crypto president. And I know that Kamala, the Harris-Walz campaign is trying to change this narrative or position her, but the White House hasn't. I don't know that I can trust that. I've been watching this movie for the last 4 years. And when you got Gary Gensler in office, when you've got Elizabeth Warren and others that have said they are anti-crypto, this isn't happening, I don't know that that's going to change. So on our side, if this does, you've got pro-crypto voices. By the way, it doesn't matter Republican, Democrat, does not matter. You've got pro-crypto voices on both sides of that spectrum.
So wait, why does the White House sign a crypto bill if Trump is about to go into office? Like, why would they do it?
If they don't, they might have a problem getting what they want passed done before the end of the year.
Okay, so you think it'll be productive because Republicans might move some things through, but that doesn't mean that it gets signed by the White House.
I don't think it'll be Republicans moving it through. I think it will be a bipartisan, nonpartisan. Yeah. I mean, yes, if Republicans are in charge, okay, we get to schedule a floor. We're going to be involved in the negotiations as to what ultimately comes to the floor. But I think this is going to be driven, when we talk about digital assets and crypto, this will be driven by a diverse group of people from across the political spectrum. And I just think their voices under that scenario are going to be elevated.
How does the calculus change for a lame duck in next year if Harris does win the White House?
So that's a little dicier. I mean, Chuck Schumer has shown us, at least with Saab 121, he sided with a handful of Democrats and Republicans trying to end that mistaken rule by the administration. For those that don't know, Saab 121 is a rule that says banks who want to be involved in the digital asset space, who want to custody crypto assets, not leverage against it, but just custody it, they have to list it on their balance sheet as a liability.
Right.
Even though you're not lending against it, you literally are a safety deposit box. Ridiculous rule. It came out of the SEC and the White House, and Schumer sided with those of us that recognize what a mistake this is. And he has said he would like to possibly move some crypto legislation before the end of the year. I wish I could trust that. It gives me hope because of his action. And again, we've got champions over in the Senate in both the Democrat conference and the Republican conference. So it's possible, but I feel better about the scenario that I've given you versus that one.
So who... I'm hearing in my reporting on crypto policy right now, a lot of people do have a lot of high hopes for this lame duck, though high hopes is like a 20% chance that something happens. Who benefits the most politically by actually getting crypto legislation done before the next Congress?
Congress benefits because you've got a group. Look, if you're my age, and people here can disagree with me, but if you're my age, you're investing in crypto digital assets to make money. If you're 18 to 40, in my mind, you've grown up with the internet, completely different from my experience when I was learning and growing. You are involved in this because you want to make the world a better place.
But wouldn't it be the Democrats who benefit the most now? Because if Republicans have a sweep in the next Congress, like you say, then they're able to claim that they helped get something through earlier. Aren't they the bigger winners then?
So Brady, maybe my problem is I don't ever put this in the perspective of Republican or Democrat. I look at this from where I was going is people in that age group, 18 to 40, they look at people like me, and when I start telling you, well, you should be able to do this on the internet, you shouldn't be able to do that, you should be able to do this with your money, you shouldn't be able to do that, you know what they do? They turn me off. That is not what they're interested in. They want to self-determine. They want to be able to make their own choices. There's a huge group of people, even I would argue the pandemic might have spawned the next generation of libertarians. They're looking to have more control over their existence. And I think that's why on the Republican side, Trump, who was, his administration, he had some great people, Brian Brooks and Hester Peirce, two examples in his administration, but they weren't like great friends of what we were doing. Now, and you've seen, I thought it was going to loosen up under the Biden administration, and it got worse. Now, Trump seems to have moved along that learning curve. I mean, yesterday he was at the bar in New York.
Yeah, pub key.
Paying with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I mean, it's and Think to him about it. He's come a long way on this issue. So,
speaking of,
I think we'll look better as a Congress. I think this age group, 18 to 40, I don't know that it means instant trust, but it'll give them hope that maybe we are listening to them.
So Tom Emmer, Mr. Bipartisan. All right, cool.
Nonpartisan.
All right. So speaking of that, let's go into a little bit in the weeds here. One thing that some folks have told me, and I am kind of new to this crypto policy thing, is that if something happens in the lame duck session, and speaking of things that young people like, I'm hearing that a cryptocurrency legislation would move alongside the safer banking bill, which is related to banking marijuana, weed. Is that right? And like, why are those two things wedded at the end of the year? Like, why would they happen together?
They're not. I mean, that must be a message coming from the Senate side.
Okay.
Because there are Senate advocates that, these are just member priorities. So if you have a member who is wants to promote pro-digital asset, pro-crypto asset legislation, and the marijuana banking legislation, well, listen, I'm going to get a whole group of voters with this one or members with this one. So they combine them. That is,
you know who
they are not wed together. I may know, but they're not wed together.
Would you tell us? I mean, I'm curious.
No, I'm not going to get into because the problem is once you start naming people, then all of a sudden people tend to get very territorial, get very standoffish.
They make for great stories, Representative. So
well, but on our side, I'm going to tell you the one thing I do know. That scenario we were talking about in the lame duck, it's going to be generated from the House side.
Okay.
I know there are senators that are like, well, we are the most important people in Washington. They haven't done anything. I mean, you got a lot of ideas over there, and they put legislation out. I mean, I remember a few years ago, we had this big to-do about this new thing that was going to come out, and it ended up being 4 or 5 pieces of legislation that 3 of them came from the House. On the House side, Patrick McHenry has been probably the leader, I would argue, when it comes to chairs who are moving things. He got the Fit 21 bill done out of his committee, off the House floor. I know that some in the Senate would say that's dead on arrival, but I got news for you. If we're talking about this in December, that one's not dead. And then there's stablecoin legislation, which not quite ready for prime time, in my opinion. Some of my colleagues, including maybe McHenry, would disagree with me. But that legislation, I think that might be some of the most consequential legislation that we could ever pass, assuming we do it right. Dollar-backed stablecoins are the future.
So we're in the last little bits of this session, and it seems like likely that the SEC is going to do some more lawsuits as we wrap up their fiscal year this month. Can you help me understand where Gary Gensler's political power comes from? Like, who is backing him, and why is he able to do so much in D.C.?
Well, it's the administration.
Okay.
Which goes back to what I told you. I don't know that I can trust this sudden new change. That hasn't changed.
Right.
I mean, I'll tell you, under the scenario that I envision for next Congress, I look forward to working with Donald Trump and pounding a stake into the heart of the administrative state. And that is one of the prime examples, Gary Gensler at the SEC, and he should be fired. He is not, he's gone well beyond, frankly, he's gone against his mission. The mission of the SEC is to make sure that every American, doesn't matter if you're wealthy or if you're poor, has access to the greatest financial markets on the planet. And this is the on-ramp for so many people of color, people that are trying to do remittances. This is a huge place that he's been frustrating ever since he got there.
And you were really frustrated with him the last time we talked in 2022, but I remember one of the things you said when we spoke is you were frustrated with his regulatory actions driving out strong entrepreneurs in this country, and you specifically said, I would like to have Sam Bankman-Fried here in our country. So are you sure, looking back, that
No.
Okay.
No, and now, what did we learn after that, right? Because obviously we didn't know much. Gary Gensler, I would argue, either directly or indirectly, was working with Sam Bankman-Fried, right, in order to allow him to be the first one to expand this in the United States. We could go through all the details, but at the end of the day, Gary Gensler had all the information. We did not. What in God's name was he doing? We didn't find out until the fall when they tried to move that ill-fated piece of legislation that was very favorable to one entity in the marketplace.
Well, misty watercolored memories there. Thank you, Representative Emmer. We're out of time. Great to see you.
All right. Thanks, Brady.
Yeah, sure.
Fun.
Please welcome to the stage Axios Pro FinTech reporter Lucinda Shen.
Good morning. I am Lucinda Shen, FinTech Axios Pro reporter. Please welcome our second guest of the morning, Better Markets co-founder, president and CEO, Dennis Kelleher. Cue music. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for being here with us today, bright and early.
Thanks for having me.
So, Dennis, I think this is an interesting conversation because you are quite the contrast to our last conversation. Folks who are in the crypto sphere and probably even beyond that probably know you as a pretty vocal critic of the industry. And so I want to get some nuance from you in terms of what you want from this. Do you want all of crypto to go away?
So look, I think the framing is often just upside down, as we actually just heard in the first 15 minutes. People, I'm not anti-crypto. I'm pro-investor. I'm pro-consumer. I'm pro-markets, and I'm pro-financial stability. The Security Exchange Commission actually exists to protect investors, markets, and financial stability while promoting capital formation. People forget that the United States markets are the envy of the world. They're the deepest, broadest, most liquid. Everybody around the world would like to have our markets because everybody around the world sends their money to our markets, and that's the jet fuel for our economy, business creation, and jobs.
Sure.
That depends, though, people forget, the reason they do that is because those markets are well regulated and well policed. That's where the faith and trust of investors come from, and consumers. That's why all that money comes from everywhere else here. They know they might lose money in investment, but they're not likely to be ripped off. There are rules of the road, and importantly, there are policemen on the street like the SEC.
So, I'm going to read between the lines here on where you stand on crypto. Does that mean, A, you don't want, your goal is not to get rid of all the crypto, your goal is to get most of it or all of it regulated by the SEC?
Look, I think for about 90 years now, the financial markets in the United States, since the great crash of '29, have been regulated into three pretty broad categories: securities, commodities, and banking. Those laws are well known and have been applied to multiple financial product and service innovations for 90 years. And all of those have come, not all, many of those come along and said, oh, we're unique and different. We're special innovation. We should get special rules for us that don't apply to anybody else. Better Markets' position is the securities laws, the commodities laws, and the banking laws have served this country and served the American people extremely well. And crypto, whether it's a commodity or a security, comfortably falls within that black letter law. And those which are securities should be regulated by the SEC, and those that are commodities should be regulated by the CFTC. And I want to correct something Congressman Emmer said when he was bashing Gary Gensler over FTX. The SEC had zero jurisdiction over FTX. You know who had jurisdiction and where FTX was a registered entity? The CFTC. The smallest financial regulatory agency, the most chronically underfunded, understaffed regulatory agency who doesn't have the capability, expertise, or wherewithal or funding to do its current job, to fulfill its current mandates, which is why the industry is pushing to get the CFTC to be their regulator. Think about this. Nowhere else would we let an industry pick its regulator. That's what's happening here. The industry is saying, I want to pick this regulator. No surprise, they want to pick the least funded, least capable, least staffed, least expertise regulator to regulate them. So they'll have a regulation in form, but not in substance. And what they're really trying to do is cripple the SEC, because the SEC is the real cop on the financial beat, and they have a record that's just very impressive. Doesn't mean they win every time. Nobody does. But by and large, they've won almost all the key cases in the crypto space, which is to say, they've won in the sense saying, crypto, you need to follow the securities laws. And that's not a radical thing. You know, every financial institution in the United States, from the biggest banks on Wall Street to the smallest two-person financial advisor in Main Street America, follow the securities, commodities, and banking laws.
Right.
Only crypto says none of that applies to us.
Well,
we want special treatment, special legislation.
Okay, so to be fair, right, one criticism that comes up from a lot of the crypto community is, yes, we have SEC as the regulator. They go to the SEC, they ask for registration, and one criticism commonly comes up is they're not able to, and there's been articles that have shown that any company that tries to register their tokens are suddenly, after the registration process, no longer, they're defunct, they're no longer in existence. Right, and that's a legitimate one. It's basically
no, that's definitely the argument. The problem is, at the headline level, it sounds really good, and it makes sense. this big bureaucratic regulators stopping my new innovation, cool thing that everybody wants. By the way, it's not everybody. They grossly exaggerate the number of users of crypto. The Fed survey, which is the most reliable independent survey, says only about 7% of the American people have ever used crypto or owned crypto. That's 18 million Americans out of 320 plus million Americans. It's a very niche product, very few people.
Right.
But they're saying, there are barriers. We can't go register our product. We can't comply with the law. No, they don't want to. What they have to do is they have to register as a broker-dealer or as an advisor or as an exchange, just like every other financial firm in the country who wants to engage in those activities. And what they want to do is they want to keep all those activities together under one entity, full of conflicts of interest and reducing customer, investor, and financial stability protections. And the SEC is saying that's not how the law works. So you need to comply with the law. If they complied with the law and they registered, and as everybody up from J.P. Morgan Chase down to the little bucket shop somewhere, if they complied with the law, it would require them to have separate entities, and they wouldn't be able to profit off the conflicts of interest that are allowed when you have a broker-dealer, an investment advisor, an exchange, and prop trading all under one roof. That's the problem. It's not that the rules aren't clear. It's not that the rules can't be complied with. It's that they don't want to comply, because if they did, it would cost them money and it would cut into their profits.
So I'm curious, why do you think, right, it is fair that I think 1 in 5, the statistics say 1 in 5 Americans own some crypto. It's not a leading issue for the electorate. Most people are more focused on the economy at the moment. That being the case, why is DC so focused on this issue right now?
Why is DC
so focused on crypto at the moment?
Well, I think it's obvious. Money talks, and lots of money talks louder, and there's no place in America where money talks than Washington, D.C. But for that, we wouldn't be here, and the discussion of crypto wouldn't exist. Frankly, what has happened is crypto has lost in the court of public opinion. If you look at the polls, it's lost in the court of law. And so what it's trying to do, having lost in both places, is buy enough political allies so it can get special legislation, because it can't win the argument on the merits. There's just this interesting poll of the 6 battleground states. They asked about crypto. And somewhere between 61 and 77% of voters in those 6 battleground states have a negative view of crypto. Ask yourself, why does the crypto industry not mention crypto in their ads? Because they know the American people have a healthy skepticism, if not hostility, to crypto. They see all the crypto crooks getting handcuffed and off to jail. They've seen the bankruptcies. They've seen the wild volatility. They saw the $2 trillion in value disappear between 2021 and 2022. They've seen, and it's not just a few bad actors. Look at the laundry list that we have here. I mean, it's pretty long. So they can't win an argument on the merits. 15 years, what's a valid social use? There isn't one. Gambling and speculation are the least bad uses for crypto. The bad uses, terrorist financing, you could go through money laundering, ransomware, pig butchering, let's go through them all. The American people are not dumb. The American people see this. They read the headlines. They can't pick up I'd like to go buy a bag of potato chips with my Bitcoin. That doesn't work. And they know, so they don't have a use or a need for it. So the only reason we're here, and the only reason so many people in Congress are talking about this, is the crypto industry has used its predatory profits to hijack the American people's agenda.
Right. Well,
and they are putting
so
their special interest on the top of that agenda.
Yep. So I'm curious, right, that money moves Washington, that's what you said. Is there, right, there's a lot of money being pumped in the system. That's true. Fair Shake is now the biggest super PAC by a lot of estimates in DC, influencing Senate elections. Is there another power that is playing the opposite side of crypto, right? Is there another money source for you, for folks who are crypto critics, right? Because it does seem like banks, asset managers, even they're jumping on board with the ETFs.
Well, when there's money to be made, financial firms are going to get in the flow because they want their cut. I mean, and I don't, no matter what, whether it's legitimate or illegitimate, or I shouldn't say illegitimate, but that's just the natural way things work. When you say, is there anybody on the other side, it's unfortunate, but by and large, Better Markets is a small independent nonprofit that advocates for the public interest. There just isn't a lot of money in advocating for the public interest. There's not a lot of profit there. We're literally a nonprofit. But we do have good public servants. Gary Gensler is one of them. I'm not saying I agree with everything that the SEC does. I don't agree with his entire agenda, as he and everybody else knows. But we do have public servants standing up for the public interest. And I will say, you're right, a lot of people, the crypto industry is not unique trying to buy Washington and get their special interests put above the public interest. They're not unique at all. They're a little bit unique in this cycle with the amount of money, for sure. But I think people should remember, we've seen this before. It happened in the 1990s. The derivatives industry, which had a lot of bipartisan political muscle and a lot of money behind it, and didn't want to be regulated, said, don't regulate us. They ultimately got the Orwellian-named Commodity Futures Modernization Act passed in a lame duck in 2000 that deregulated derivatives. And the amount of derivatives in the world grew from a tiny amount to a huge amount. And in 7 to 8 years, derivatives contributed to blowing up the world, causing the worst financial crash in 2008 since 1929. The key accelerant of that was derivatives, unregulated derivatives that were bought in the 90s on a bipartisan base and passed in a lame duck. It was one of the dumbest things that could have been done, and it was all done. And here we are again, not 15 years later. And what do we have? We have part of the financial industry trying to jam through their special interest legislation in a lame duck that's going to largely deregulate them, although have the form of regulation without the reality of regulation.
Well, so, on a very dark note, and we're almost out of time, but given all those factors together, right, there's not a lot of money going into the anti-crypto side of things. It seems like it's moving through Congress. Are you fighting a losing battle?
Well, I don't think there's a lot of money going into the anti-crypto side. I don't think there's no money going into the anti-crypto side. It's all going into the crypto side. There are people who are standing up to that wall of money. And I will say, the gold standard for a public servant standing up to the pressure of industry was the former CFTC Commissioner Brooksley Born. And she stood up in 1999 and 2000 and said, no, don't deregulate derivatives because they're going to cause a financial crash. They need to be regulated. As a financial product, let's regulate them. Let's let the good from that product and not the bad from that product. And they said no. And she's the symbol of courage, right? And now what we have, unfortunately, is too many people who are bending to the power, money, and might of the crypto industry. And I think the American people are going to pay the price in the future for that if people don't actually make that industry follow the law like everybody else.
Okay, well, I guess until the next crash, unfortunately, our time is up. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much.
Dennis Kelleher.
Yeah.
Hope everyone's gotten 2 cups of coffee at this point. So I'd love to reintroduce crypto author Brady Dale onto the stage. Hi, Brady.
Linda.
So the crypto industry right now, as it is at an inflection point in Capitol Hill. Regulation in the industry is cropping up. I would love to talk about why this space matters. Brady has actually been here for the last week talking with lobbyists, folks on Congress, on the Hill. I want to hear from you, your unvarnished take, your behind-the-scenes opinion. What have people been saying that our 2 speakers so far have not said?
Oh, that they haven't said. It's a good question. I mean, I guess the thing that is not exactly being talked about, we're talking a lot about what could happen. It's just there is a very strong chance that under one scenario or another, it just continues to be that the status quo continues on, that just nothing happens. Like that is a stronger chance than I think many people want to grapple with. So I guess that would be my answer, is like dealing with this idea that like gridlock around these issues could continue on.
That there is no bill, it's just...
No bill. Maybe Kamala Harris wins the White House, she keeps Gary Gensler in place, he continues sort of doing the regulation by enforcement thing. And Congress has been known to not be able to pass things before. That's happened. It often doesn't happen, but sometimes it happens. And so nothing could move. So I guess that's the thing that no one has really talked about yet today.
Interesting. Well, do you think how much of it hinges on Gary Gensler versus other agencies in the space?
Well, I do think, I think it all depends on who wins the White House and what they decide to do. But yeah, we wrote a little while back about how the Department of the Treasury has tons of power in this space. And if it turns out, so like if it turns out that the money the crypto spends in this election really registers with elected leaders and they're like, we've got to do something to move things forward one way or another. And maybe you have a Harris White House. And so she wants to do something, but is a little bit more, is reluctant. She doesn't want to just like open the floodgates, but she wants to be seen to allowing it to exist. You know, then I think we're likely to see a lot of moves from Treasury in a variety of ways around things like stablecoins, around things like AML, KYC, you know your customer sort of stuff. A lot of more specific rules coming out there, which like the crypto industry may not love, they may not be optimal, but they would still kind of say it's like okay to move. So I think in the end of the day, like, you know, everything that has to do with money comes back to Treasury. So I think they've been kind of like keeping their powder somewhat dry. They've done things, but they could do a lot more. And so the next Treasury Secretary is the thing that I'm watching.
Okay, that's an exciting one. I feel like most people don't talk about that.
Yeah, it could be powerful.
Could be powerful. I'll ask you the question everyone wants to know that no one seems to have the answer for. What does Kamala Harris want in crypto?
We have no idea. And anyone who says we do know, they're I don't know, they're taking too much hopium. You know, the only thing that's come out is a very vague comment by one of her staffers at the DNC. And if you look at the transcript of that conversation, he didn't really say anything. And so I think that's why a lot of people in the industry, and especially the grassroots rank and file, are leaning Republican in this term because, you know, the history of the Biden administration has not been particularly open-minded. The big things that have happened is the 2 ETFs were approved. But remember, the courts forced them to do that, right? So if you look at the people who she has in her staff, they have been a part of a lot of the more restrictive things the Biden administration has done. So it's kind of hard for me to believe that there really is a reset coming in a Kamala White House.
Right. And honestly, it could be smart for her, right? Strategically, as we're talking about the elections, to stay silent.
Yeah.
You know, there's more gray room for people to speculate that she might be more pro-crypto than they previously thought.
Yeah, a thing that I suspect that our last speaker, and don't say we didn't give you both sides this morning, folks, but like our last speaker is maybe right about is that the political backing of crypto from rank and file voters is maybe not as big as the crypto industry would like you to believe. And if that's right, you know, one can imagine that like continuing to be somewhat restrictive on the industry is a bone that Harris can throw to the progressive base to say that she's still like somewhat with him that doesn't cost her too much elsewhere. So,
right.
You know, I don't know.
Yeah, worth noting that when they had the executive, it wasn't an executive order, but an order to study, right? The Biden administration had an order just to study crypto.
Yeah.
The industry took that as a very positive sign, and it didn't go anywhere.
No, well, I mean, all the studies were like, this stuff is terrible and we need to like shut it down. I mean, that's kind of what they all said, you know, so yeah.
Yep. All right, our time is up. Brady, always love it when we have these conversations.
Yeah.
It's so good to see you in DC. Stay right here, folks, for a quick segment with our Axios publisher, Nick Johnson.
Peace.
Introducing our View from the Top host and Axios publisher, Nicholas Johnston.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today on Congressman Emmer said this lovely fall morning. We're so excited to see so many crypto enthusiasts here, hopefully subscribers to Brady's newsletter. We're also hugely grateful to all of our partners. Like nothing we do at Axios is possible without the support of our partners. Our investments in journalism, convening conversations like this. So hugely, hugely thankful to Consensus for making this morning's a very important conversation possible. And so I'm very excited to welcome to the stage for a View from the Top conversation, the CEO and founder of Consensus and a co-founder of the Ethereum blockchain, Joseph Lubin. Welcome to the Axios stage. How are you?
Great, thank you.
You've got a pretty awesome resume as a company CEO and founder, and also the Ethereum co-founder. From that vantage point, like, educate this Washington crowd. Like, what should they be thinking of? What do you wish they knew about blockchain and crypto technology?
Blockchain.
They don't know?
Can you hear me okay? It's working. So first, we're at a sensitive and dynamic moment in history. Things are complicated in the world. Lots of elections going on this year. We're probably at the end of a super cycle, a generational stress and how generational super cycle, a monetary debt super cycle. And we've seen the maturation of two of the most profound technologies invented in human history. One is decentralized protocols, Ethereum, blockchain, crypto. The other is AI. And they are both going to change everything. The invention of decentralization happened essentially with BitTorrent a couple decades ago. Satoshi Nakamoto took that technology and married it to the idea of money. And so decentralization is one of the most profound inventions in human history, decentralized trust. And that's what we're here talking about, and that's what we've built upon. So the world has operated top-down command and control through intermediaries that maintain these centralized databases that indicate who owns what, who has what rights and responsibilities. And Satoshi Nakamoto came along and said, hey, let's flip the vector of trust upside down. So instead of authorities imbuing intermediaries with power and trust, we could all have access to this new kind of database system, this new source of trust, and then we can re-architect systems based on this new database that everybody can directly inspect, can directly manipulate, can add programs to, and that's essentially what Ethereum is. So the idea behind Ethereum and blockchain and crypto is that we can re-architect the systems of the world on sounder trust foundations, and it feels like we need sounder trust foundations in the world these days. The other piece there is that big tech started out doing great things for the world, but has kind of captured the internet. And big tech has turned into a weapon of mass manipulation, and the weapon of mass manipulation is not only available to domestic interests, it's also available to international interests, and it's being used to do harm to this nation.
Right.
Just final piece, big tech is about to surge ahead even further in more disturbing ways with its access to data and compute. So marry big tech to AI, and you have the most powerful weapon for controlling the world that has ever been imagined. If you do marry big tech and AI to decentralized protocols, then we can build AI systems that can be broadly governed and transparently governed.
So almost here, blockchain is almost could be a response or a bulwark against the growing power.
They're beautifully complementary, and it's necessary that they be complementary.
Do you think this town is starting to get it? Let's take a step back from policy proposals, but just in the context of like the election and what's happening with the presidential candidates, they're starting to think a little differently about crypto. Do you get that sense? Or starting to understand?
Yeah, every 4 years it seems that the legislators get a little more open-minded about certain things. And so we've seen a couple different camps. One, people who know the technology, get the technology, are savvy, or it's usually a younger crowd, but it doesn't have to be. We have noticed that if you see the technology, if you spend a little time using it or getting educated on it, you understand the profound benefits and implications of blockchain and crypto. Once you've seen that, you can't really unsee how the world could be transformed. And there are people who have seen it, but have different agendas, who have vested interests. And so there are large financial institutions, there are actors in government. The United States likes to run the world through intermediaries and through financial intermediaries. And our technology is all about removing or reducing intermediaries. It's about right-sizing the power of intermediaries. And so there are vested interests who understand the power of the technology and are working hard to kill, slow, or co-opt.
Well, you've gotten, I think, right at the tension might find in this.
Those are our two.
All right. Well, so then when you're hanging out on the Hill, when you're going to agencies, what's your message to folks in Washington to address that?
We've seen this story before. A long time ago, there was one big telecom company, and if it had its way, we would all be fed digital content via a single AT&T branded service. France went that way with Minitel for a few years. Smart, thoughtful people recognized the opportunity. So different technologies, different networking technologies were developed, and the internet started to mature. The Telecommunications Act of 1996, plus safe harbor provisions, enabled the internet and the web to blossom as an open platform. So rather than controlled by a monopoly, things were thrown wide open, and we had competition and innovation, supported and fostered in the U.S. And America won the internet. America won the web, and that was very good for America. That was very, very good for the world, for all the people.
We're at a similar moment now.
So that's the moment that we're at right now. We had Web 1.0, we had Web 2.0, now we have Web 3.0. Web 3.0 is all about decentralized protocol technologies. It's all about Ethereum, it's all about Bitcoin, it's all about tokenization of virtually everything. And if America squanders this opportunity, if America tries to forego becoming part of the evolution of the internet and the web, that's going to be terrible for innovators in this ecosystem, in this country, and it's going to be terrible for users in this.
Before we run out of time here, let's stick to that final point, I think, for a second. We just had Brady and Lucinda up here talking about how there are concerns there might not be anything done, and we'll just continue in this status quo. What is the potential, like paint a bigger picture of what that potential downside is, and the need for some kind of action?
So we're doing fine on our own, even though the United States has been trying to kill us for a while. And so Chair Gensler, after arranging to teach blockchain at MIT, came in to run the SEC, and he asked Congress for a mandate. He recognized very publicly that most of these tokens, he said 75% of these tokens are not securities. And he asked for a mandate because these tokens are so different in nature. Some of them are securities. Some of them are tickets to events. Some of them are collectibles.
Right.
Some of them are tokens in a decentralized physical infrastructure network for wireless technology. Not all of these things should be under the purview of the SEC. And so what we really need is an open-minded, fostering, nurturing environment, so that we can explore the different dimensions of the technology, and the implications of what it will do, and it will be very transformative of society. So a light approach, a bipartisan, a recognition that it is a bipartisan issue. If the Democrats and the Republicans were squabbling about the internet in the early 90s, America might not have won the internet.
Right.
And this is the situation that we're at. Hopefully we're just about to move beyond the squabbling into a bipartisan approach to this. Great example is the Gillibrand Lummis collaboration on a couple of different bills. Both of them really understand the technology well, done some great thinking, and fingers crossed we will turn this into an American discussion rather than a partisan discussion.
That's a great call to action. The senator will be here shortly. Joseph, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for Consensus for making this conversation possible. Stick around. We have a big finish coming.
Thanks.
Joseph, thank you.
Welcoming back to the stage, Lucinda Shen.
All right, so our next guest is one of the lawmakers leading the charge on crypto legislation in Capitol Hill. Please welcome onto the stage with me, New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Hi, everybody. Good morning.
So I'll ask you something that I asked Brady earlier. You are on the crypto. You did recently do an event with Crypto for Harris. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you: have you heard anything in terms of Kamala's position on the industry?
Not specifically, but I know they've been having industry meetings, and that's a really great sign. I think this is something that she's going to be excited to get involved with. I think it's a very forward-looking industry. She comes from San Francisco. She comes from Northern California. It's a very forward-looking community. It's a very innovative community. So I think her disposition is likely to be very positive.
What kind of questions have her people been asking?
To me, none. I haven't talked to any of them, but I know that they've been meeting with industry, and that's a great sign that they're interested in learning and getting knowledge and being in conversation with the industry across the country.
Okay, so I wanted to also ask you, right, you've been co-sponsor on a number of crypto-related bills now. You're known for being a champion of the industry on the Democrat side. You have one on innovation and then another one around kind of where the CFTC and the SEC draw their lines, and another stablecoin bill. What's the status of those as we're coming to the end of the year, an election year, no less? What's more likely to get through at this point, and what needs to happen for us to get there?
Well, I'm very hopeful that we can have some votes on our crypto legislation in the lame duck. The one bill that's really very well positioned is the one written through the Ag Committee on the CFTC regulatory oversight for digital commodities. That bill has gone through many iterations, and it's a Stabenow Bozeman effort. They haven't introduced the actual compromise language yet, but I imagine after the election, it's a great time to do so. We're also hoping to do the Farm Bill in that time frame as well. So there's a lot of room in that last few weeks to do good bipartisan legislation. If we do get any crypto legislation on the floor, I'm hopeful that I can amend it with either a market structure bill or a stablecoin bill to add more regulatory framework in this Congress. I think McHenry is very eager to do something on market structure in the House, so he'll probably be pushing for the same thing, and that's a good start. So I'm hopeful that because some people are leaving, Debbie Stabenow's leaving Congress, McHenry's leaving Congress, they want to do this one thing before they leave, so that's going to create some energy and some momentum to legislate, and I'm very excited about that.
Right, that would be end of this year, beginning of next year?
Yep, end of this year, because we come back right after the election, mid-November. We're here through November and beginning of December. So you've got about 4 weeks of work, maybe 5 weeks, that we could get something meaningful done.
Well, what are the compromises that need to be made, right? Because I remember when you were talking about specifically the stablecoin bill with Senator Lummis a few months ago, the idea was to maybe pass it through along with a vehicle that was around kind of marijuana banking, banker compensation. That conversation I haven't heard much of since. What's going on there, or what needs to come next?
So I don't know whether it'll be paired with something or be part of a larger deal. But that's the kind of deal making that Senator Schumer's in charge of. And Senator Schumer's really embraced the industry and is very excited about legislating in this space as well. And that's a great sign for the industry because he's the majority leader. He's likely going to be the majority leader or the ranking leader for the next 10, 15 years. So he represents Democratic leadership, and that's a great signal to the industry that this is something that we are taking seriously, that we want to create rules of the road, that we want to see innovation. And for New York, I think this is something that Senator Schumer and I share. We want this industry to stay and grow in New York. We are the center of the world financial markets. We want to be the center of blockchain and cryptocurrency. I think it's a huge opportunity for the innovation ecosystem in New York to be very proactive on this. And I think that's certainly what I'll be pushing for. And I think Senator Schumer's really excited about it.
On a presidential level, or even actually just in terms of the context of this current election cycle, we have a few battleground states. I think it's obvious, right, for San Francisco and probably New York, there's an over-index of folks who are in the crypto industry that are really supporters, right? Do you think it matters as much for some of these battleground states, this conversation around crypto?
I think for people who really care about the issue, who are just getting involved in politics, it's a way for them to engage candidates and it's a way for them to participate in politics. And I think engagement in our democracy is really important for everybody. I think it's also important that people come to Washington, to come to conferences like this, so you can hear from your lawmakers about what's likely and what's possible. I think making sure your senators in your states know what your industry is, what your businesses are, what your business plan is, how it works. It's really important because when they're aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it, they're much more likely to get excited about it and want to create a regulatory environment where their companies in their state will thrive.
So I think one hypothesis, one analysis of what's going on in the current election and why there's so much focus on crypto is the enormous amount of capital that's poured into it. I think folks who were listening in the past conversations, one thing that was brought up is the fact that Fair Shake is now known to be the largest super PAC, and they are a crypto super PAC, but it doesn't seem like it's as big of an issue for all of Americans, right? A bigger issue is the economy, a bigger issue is inflation at the moment. That is really dominating more of the headlines, more of the...
And reproductive rights. I think the
reproductive
economy,
rights.
cost of things,
Yes.
reproductive rights are top 3 issues. Also public safety is a big issue in New York. So those are the issues that most Americans are focused on. People in the industry may want to focus specifically on who's going to be able to help us get from A to B. But I think it is a bipartisan issue, and I think we all agree that we want a very positive ecosystem for growth and for investment, but also for consumer protection, also for safety and soundness, also for competitiveness internationally. So we want to have rules of the road that makes our jurisdiction the most effective for oversight, accountability, and competitiveness so that bad actors don't flock to the United States. We want really thoughtful leaders who are creating new industries and new growth here, and bad actors will be forced abroad, which just makes our market so much stronger, so much more stable, and it allows for Americans to have much more accessibility and consumer protection. So we want the United States to be the best jurisdiction to be a crypto company, to be a blockchain innovator. And that's the work that has to be done. And that's the work that Cynthia Lummis and I have done in the Senate. We're waiting to get our bills voted on. Certainly Maxine Waters and McHenry are doing that in the House. And so there are strong bipartisan leaders. I think it's important that the industry stay bipartisan and not become one-sided, because you can't create laws with just one party. It's not possible. It's not how laws get written. So I think it's important to figure out how to be involved, be engaged, and participate, but recognize this is something that is a very important bipartisan issue.
Okay. Well, so how do you respond to the kind of this criticism that a lot of the current attention on crypto is being run by lobbying dollars?
That what's being run by lobbying
The current
dollars?
interest in crypto, the current interest in crypto.
I don't think that's true, because certainly Cynthia and I have been working on our legislation for over 2 years, so not even in the electoral cycle. We've done a market structure bill over 2 cycles, last year and the year before, improving the bill over multiple months. And I think the difference is that many members of Congress just don't have a staff member who is knowledgeable about crypto, or they themselves haven't had a lot of companies in their state come to them to meet with them to tell them about their industry. So I think for certainly the colleagues I know well, it's not a lack of interest, it's a lack of knowledge. And I think through engagement with their own constituents who either want to participate in the markets or who are market leaders in the industry, those meetings and conversations need to happen. So I think it's really just an opportunity for people to engage and for constituents to engage their elected leaders to say what's important to them. But I don't think it's about the election cycle. I think for people who are just tuning in, it's about the election cycle. But for a lot of us, we've been working on this for several years.
Your bills have kind of spread across the spectrum. You've done stable coins. There's language in your bills on illicit finance. One thing that's occurred to me is we've seen a bunch of fraud, right? We've seen FTX failures. We've seen further back the Bitfinex hack. The capital eventually gets tracked. Eventually, the capital gets claimed. But one challenge has been kind of the amount of time it takes to get the capital back. Another issue has been really, do you give it back in cash? Do you give it back in cryptocurrencies? Do you have a solution for that on a regulatory level? Do you think there is a way to solve for that so that folks in the industry, if there is a hack or fraud, can get their capital in a more timely manner?
I think the fact that they get their capital back is such a good thing that doesn't exist in any other context of fraud. So you look at all these seniors who their life savings are being taken from their bank accounts, who get some scam that their grandson is in a prison in Mexico and they have to immediately send, $5,000 to get him a lawyer. These international criminal networks are stealing money from people every day in the trillions of dollars. And the great thing about the cryptocurrency and blockchain industry is that it's 100% transparent and it's 100% permanent. And so you can actually make people who are victims of crime whole in a way that's not possible for these other types of crimes where they're sending cash, wiring money, doing all sorts of things that is harder to find and trace. And so the traceability of it is a blessing, and it's allowing us to actually make consumers whole.
Yes, it is a blessing, although the timeline rate, I think
But that's for all crime. If you've ever been in the criminal justice system, if you're, a victim of any crime, it takes FBI, local police departments, a year to investigate that crime. And then if there's a lawsuit and a conviction, that's another year. And then there's appeals. Like, the justice system is slow. It's not crypto that's slow, and it's not you getting compensated slower than anybody else. The criminal justice system is very slow. And so to get your payment back, it's not surprising it takes a long time.
Okay. So you don't see it as a regulatory issue?
I really don't, because it's the criminal justice system that's the problem. But there's no reason why you can't improve it. So if there's things that can be improved, you should improve those things. But to me, when I look at all the financial crime that exists in society, no one gets their money back. And for these particular groups of people, because crypto is transparent and permanent, it's really a remarkable thing that you do get your money back.
All right, so we've got literally 1 second, so I'll ask you this. You ran for president in 2020, or you ran for that. Any interest in doing that in the future?
Well, I'm running for Senate right now, and I'm really excited to continue to serve in the U.S. Senate. I find that the role I have, not only in this industry, but on cybersecurity, national security, I'm on the Intel and Armed Services Committee, is really exciting. So I'm very focused on New York right now, and I hope to earn the support of my state this year.
Okay, so maybe
in many, many years in the future, but not right now.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much, Senator Gillibrand, for your time. Unfortunately, we are out. But everyone else, please hang tight for our final guest.
Thank you. Take care.
Welcoming back to the stage, Brady Dale.
Hey, I'm back. If you haven't signed up for Axios Crypto yet, please do that right now. But get ready for our next and final guest of this morning, the guy who leads policy at the biggest cryptocurrency exchange in the country, Coinbase, Faryar Shirzad. Welcome. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
All right. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're the guy who's led policy for Coinbase as long as they've been doing policy, right?
That's right.
Okay. Give us the behind the scenes of what you're doing on the Hill and how that's changed over your time leading policy for the exchange. Has the conversation shifted?
I'll answer it in a couple of different ways. One way I'll answer it is that doing policy in crypto is a lot different than in most other industries, in the sense that there's a massive grassroots community of crypto owners who are fired up and want to be a part of the process. And so one of the early conversations I had with Brian Armstrong was a lot about the kind of traditional things you do in advocacy in Washington, which is kind of making your case, preparing studies, doing analysis, kind of explaining the issues. But one of the things that he emphasized, which I've enjoyed the most has been the part about taking the community and bringing them into the process. And as you know, we helped start this grassroots organization, StandWithCrypto.org. And we, over the course of 1 year, have had 1.4 million people across the country sign up as crypto advocates. That's an extraordinary number of people who sort of put their hands up and said they want to be a part of the debate. And that's just indicative of the energy that exists. And that's why so many politicians, I think, have realized that this is not just an industry issue, but this is a kind of an American people issue. And that's been a superpower for the industry.
So I want to get to Stand With Crypto. I do think it's really interesting. But could you tell us about legislators who have shifted while you've been, maybe one stonefall while you gave you a blank face and now are at least kind of interested? And definitely name names if you're game, which you should totally name names.
Well, I mean, the number of legislators who are now understand the crypto issue and are enthusiastic advocates has gone up dramatically over the course of the last 3 years. So you had a handful of members, Mr. Emmer in particular, Senator Gillibrand and others who early on understood the importance of being on the front foot with new innovations, particularly when they have real kind of broad national security and economic growth and jobs implications. But those numbers have grown. Members have sort of sat down, had staff members who helped them kind of get their arms around the issue, and the impact on policy has been dramatic, actually.
Has anyone surprised you at the way they've come around or their shift?
No, but I find that everybody comes at it from a different perspective. And so members who have more of a national security orientation recognize that the efforts that Gary Gensler and others are making to push the industry offshore are essentially a replay of what happened with 5G and semiconductors. We're essentially taking a critical, cutting-edge, new wave technology and driving it offshore. And right now, there's a lot of work going on in DC about what happened with 5G, what happened with semiconductors, how did we let that happen? And I think for a lot of national security members, they bring that lens to it and they say, we don't quite know where this technology and innovation is going to go, but it should grow in the US under US rules by Americans. And I think that animates a lot of people. People who are more into keeping the US as a financial center, like Senator Gillibrand, understand that every other financial center in the world, is far along in the process of creating rules to integrate digital assets and crypto into their broader financial systems. The US at this point is caught in this really unusual political knot. And you have senators like Gillibrand who are very focused on New York as a financial center, and as she said herself, want New York to be on the cutting edge, and they understand the clear rules are critical to make that happen.
So let's go to Stand With Crypto and also Fair Shake. So the way it looks to me is both of those initiatives were very strongly led by Coinbase, but maybe I'm wrong. What is your relationship to Stand With Crypto and Coinbase? How much are you all the leaders in those organizations, or am I overstating your role?
So Fair Shake is a super PAC, and super PACs operate independently. So we contributed to Fair Shake as did
a fair amount,
a large amount, as did maybe 30 other industry partners. Now we obviously did a very large amount. There was a few others who matched the numbers that we contributed to Fair Shake, but it's run independently.
But was it you guys' idea? Was it Coinbase's idea?
We were very involved. We recognized that. I mean, the thesis that we had, or the issue that we realized, is that for all our efforts to explain crypto people, we were facing this kind of unusual hyper-politicization of the crypto issue, frankly, because of one or two or three, like a handful of members of Congress who had decided to make it a political football. And we ultimately realized that we had to build a comprehensive political operation to essentially depoliticize crypto. And one component of that was to create a super PAC, and that's what Fair Shake is. The other part of it was to activate the grassroots, and that's where Stand With Crypto comes. We created Stand With Crypto. It's a 501c4 organization, which you'll know what that means. It operates with its own board and management team. We're a significant contributor to it. We talk to them a lot. We provide some tech support to them. We co-host events from time to time. But it's very much intended to kind of become an independent entity and actually operate globally, which we're very excited about.
Yeah. One of the things that's been interesting about Coinbase to me politically is when I started covering crypto back in 2017, previous administration, the SEC would crack down on some new token or coin, and they would just tuck tail between their legs and close up shop. That's just, you don't fight your regulator. Coinbase is fighting, and other people are following Coinbase's lead.
Yeah.
How has that changed your work on the Hill, talking to legislators, seeing your company get more aggressive than anyone else, previously has done with their regulator?
Well, no company, particularly no public company, wants to be fighting with the SEC. I mean, that's just not a position anybody really wants to be in. But you had an SEC that in 2021 signed off on Coinbase becoming public with the exact same business model that a year later they declared was an illegal sort of unregistered securities operation. Plus, you had an SEC chair who, for a year as the new chair over the course of his first year in office, declared that the SEC had no jurisdiction over digital assets, and then at some point, about a year in, declared that not only did the SEC have jurisdiction, but every single token, but other than Bitcoin, was an unregistered securities offering. And so when you're facing a situation where the law, the rules don't seem to apply, you ultimately have to seek clarity where you can get it. And one component of that has been going to Congress and trying to get federal legislation to clarify what's a crypto commodity, what's a crypto security. The other part of that is going to the courts and getting clarity. And in our view, if the SEC won't give us clarity, the courts should give us clarity. And so there's a whole bunch of us in the industry who've essentially taking that tack, and so there's a multitude of court cases. It feels inevitable to us that this will ultimately end up in the Supreme Court. Are the millions and millions and millions of dollars that are being spent on litigation ultimately, would they have been kind of better used for other purposes, and Congress just simply step in and provide clarity? Probably, but we are where we are, and so we have to take the courses available to us.
For those following along at home, it's very confusing. There is both Coinbase versus the SEC out there and SEC versus Coinbase. And anytime news comes up about these, I'm like, wait, which one is this? So yeah, and there's a hearing on Monday that you guys have coming up on I think that's Coinbase versus the SEC. So
yeah, we have two different cases. One, they've charged us with operating an unregistered securities exchange, which again, remember, we went public under their watch. They signed off on us on our S1 and then turn around now. And so, we're defending ourselves vigorously in that one. We also have a separate proceeding where we're in court asking the courts to essentially ask the SEC to provide clarity as to why they're not providing clear rules to the industry.
So a thing that people in the industry have been saying to me since I started on this beat, 7 years ago, is we'll basically take any rules you want to give us, just give us some clear rules. But that seems, I don't know, I have a little bit of a hard time believing that. Are there things that Coinbase would just draw a line on? Is there a bridge too far in terms of the rules? Is there stuff that it would make you guys come out against clear legislation?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it goes without saying that any regulation has to be sensible and workable. And one issue is treating a digital token as a security is absurd. The token is it's software. It's a line. And the SEC has now actually conceded that point. For after 2.5 years, three and a half years of arguing that the tokens themselves were somehow securities, they've now conceded the point that yes, okay, the tokens themselves are never securities. It's the context in which the token is offered. So the kind of the seminal Howey case involved an orange grove, and it wasn't like the oranges were the security, but the orange grove and the oranges produced by the orange grove were, contracted under the terms of what was treated as an investment contract, and then covered by the 33 and 34 Act. And so it's taken us 3.5 years to get to kind of simple logical stuff. And so if the rules don't make sense, then obviously we'll express a view on that. But people like Senator Gillibrand and most of the people who are working on this legislation, including the 71 Democrats who lined up with every Republican in the House in support of FIT 21, I think ultimately will recognize clear, sensible rules that are fit for purpose, that make sense, and frankly track to some extent what the rest of the world is doing. Is probably the right answer, and I think we're pretty confident we'll get there.
So looking at the lame duck, which folks keep talking about, can you tell us about how you all are strategizing around the lame duck? What are you doing to lay the groundwork for something moving?
Well, legislation's hard, and in the end, it's above our pay grade as to when the leadership of the House and the Senate decide that there's room to move crypto legislation. And so, what I've said all along to my management and to everybody else is you never know when that window opens, so all you can do is press. So that's a long way of saying we're pressing all the time. If for some reason lightning strikes and we get an opportunity to move legislation even in the next 2-3 weeks while they're still in town, we'll take it.
Will it be a Senate bill or a House bill? Fit 21 or whatever it is the Ag Committee is working on?
Whatever it is. In the end, they'll have to conference it out, whether they pre-conference it or otherwise. But the House has acted. They passed something on a bipartisan basis. The Senate has not yet moved anything out of committee.
Okay.
And so what the right vehicle is, they'll figure it out. But we're supportive. And we're hoping something does happen in the lame duck.
So last really important question for you. Dogecoin or dog with hat?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Dogecoin or dog with hat? Which one? What's your pick?
Well, we're token neutral, as they say. So we're for having clear, safe way for people to trade their tokens, whether it's Dogecoin or anything else.
All right, very diplomatic. All right, well, thank you very much, Mr. Shirzad. Great to have you here. That's it for us this morning. Thank you all for coming. It was great to have you. Thanks to our audience, to our sponsor, Consensus, and have a great day. Hopefully, we'll see you at another Axios event here in DC or elsewhere. Peace.